Good evening everyone, we are at RedDrama Studios and this is RedDrama series. In this episode we share another weird and mysterious drama from the dark side of the music history. Sometimes we go through unbelievable stories that look like movies but with real people as actors. Stories that resemble noir films with crimes and murders, and stories that resemble a movie genre described as disaster film, like Cloverfield or Flight with Denzel Washington. If the story of our episode was a movie, it would be exactly a disaster film, like Flight, with an airplane as subject, lots of people on board, and something bad that is going to happen. But again, our story is not a movie, so we will not find any heroes with any superpower to actually end the plot of the story with "and they lived happily ever after." In this case, the few people that survived in that plane were only affected by luck, because here we narrate the sad experience of Lynyrd Skynyrd, and the accident happened in that 20th October 1977. In this story, the plane is not a long-range wide-body jet airliner like in Flight the movie. It's way smaller. It's a Converse CV300, a boosted conversion of the initial production CV240, characterized by a tapered fuselage, painted with red and blue stripes all along, and two propeller engines. The CV240 was a mid-40 project used as a private aircraft for rich people and politicians. It was the first private aircraft used in a United States presidential campaign, exactly one of John F. Kennedy. By 1955, Convair Company stops the production of the 240, but it's still a good plane to be viewed around, till late 70, where many 240 were updated with boosted engines. The one that is in our interest belonged to a rental company called L&J Company of Edison in Texas, who rented for bands that needs to travel quickly all over the United States for tournée. And so, in the night of October 20th, 1977, on that CV300, the one with the red and blue stripes, there were 26 people that had something to do with a rock band. The band is Lynyrd Skynyrd, and in that year they are imposing themselves as pioneers of Southern rock, which is a subgenre of rock, developed in the southern United States from rock and roll, country, and blues genre. Their latest album, Street Survivors, released exactly 3 days earlier, is already scaling charts. That evening, they had just played a gig at the Memorial Auditorium of Greenville in South Carolina, and next day they had to play in Baton Rouge at Louisiana State University, where they will be attended by an expected crowd of 10,000 people. As we know, people that work around bands are a lot. Lynyrd Skynyrd former members are 7, but there is also a tour manager who organizes everything, and usually he has assistants. There are session men that play for the band, men from the record label, stewards, and close friends who travel along with the band. All of them are on board on the CV300, 24 people exactly, plus the 2 pilots, in totally 26 people. So it is around 6 p.m. The plane just flew over Gillsburg, a small town in Mississippi. Some of them are playing poker at the moment, and the 2 pilots in the cabin, Walter Wiley McCreary, who is the first pilot, and co-pilot William John Gray, both of them from Texas, are smooth flying the plane. When the co-pilot at first looks at the right engine, it's a while that it is giving some trouble and sees that it's blocked. Then a look at the fuel level, and surprisingly seems empty. The black indicator matches with the bottom red reserve indicator. Level 0. The fuel tank is empty. What the hell, we are running out of gas. But let's take a step back. Lynyrd Skynyrd is a teacher. He's a gym teacher and basketball coach at Robert Lee High School in Jacksonville, Florida. Now, the high school's name is linked to a general of the Southern Army, and in fact, the school is very traditionalist. But Coach Skynyrd in particular is a very traditionalist person. He's that kind of teacher that you see in comedy movies. That kind of strict teacher, a bit nazi, let's say a harsh guy. Mr. Skynyrd hates those kids that are part of that movement who promote openness and tolerance as alternative to restrictions. That movement that went around through the 60s, 70s, exactly that one. The flower children, also called hippies. He doesn't cotton with hippies, and most of all, guess, he hates men with long hair. What kind of trend is that? You can't tell who is man and who is woman. It's anti-American. Those guys should go straight to a barber. Among that hippie students, in care of Coach Skynyrd, there is one which name is Ronnie Van Zant. Ronnie is a big kid that hasn't made up his mind yet. He would like to make it in sport as a professional baseball player or boxer or car racer. But then he finds out his true vocation. In the 60s, there are a lot of bands that begin to play music and rock and roll, so he sets up his own band. Ronnie starts forming a band called My Backyard with some friends. They're all long-haired guys like him. The band later changed to the Noble Five before becoming the 1%. Until that day when Mr. Skynyrd sends Ronnie and others to the principal's office for wearing their hair too long and getting a suspension. As a way of getting back, they decided to pay tongue-in-cheek homage and make fun of his teacher, a bit nazi, by renaming themselves Lynyrd Skynyrd, changing the vowels with Y's and crippling the name to avoid a lawsuit. But the ironic thing after all is that Coach Skynyrd is not really an asshole like he seems, and despite their high school acrimony, actually the band developed a friendly relationship with Coach Skynyrd through years. He even starts listening to their music, and the band invited him many times to introduce them at concerts. Ladies and gentlemen, here Mr. Lynyrd Skynyrd, the coach, and these are Lynyrd Skynyrd, the band. A nice ending wheel story, unluckily the one that still remains unsolved between Neil Young and Ronnie Van Zant, where the urban legend talks about Ronnie's will to being buried with a Neil Young's t-shirt as a way to say, "You come with me." But that's another story. Lynyrd Skynyrd mixed together blues, country, R&B and gospel. They fused it with rock blues that was in the 60s, and together with the Allman Brothers Band, they gave birth to Southern rock. Coincidentally, for Lynyrd Skynyrd, the word Southern is not just a way to identify a music genre, but also a way to remark the provenance for most of the band's members. In fact, they all come from South, like Alan Collins, one of the guitarists that comes from Jacksonville, Florida, along with Gary Rossington, the other guitarist, and the bass player, Leon Wilkeson. Another guitarist that also sings along with Ronnie is Steve Gaines, and comes from Oklahoma, like his sister Casey, where along with Leslie Hawkins and JoJo Billingsley, they formed the Honkets, a female backing vocal trio for Skynyrd. And the drummer Thomas Pyle, also called Artemus, comes from Tennessee. Okay, now, as we can actually guess, all of them are on that plane, except for JoJo Billingsley, and later we will tell why. It's around 6 p.m. The Converse CV300 with the red and blue stripes is getting closer to an exit of the Federal Highway 55, just near Gillsburg, Mississippi, when the co-pilot John Gray looks at the fuel level and notices that the fuel tank is almost empty. Not enough, the right engine that wasn't properly working stops completely, and after a while the left engine also breaks off. Mayday, it's panic, because McCreary and Gray know what is going to happen. Who better than them? Clearly, the plane at 4,500 feet without gas is slowly gonna approach the ground. There is a small rural airstrip at 8 miles from them at Macomb County Airport. McCreary asks the authorization for an emergency landing. The tower control authorizes the pilot, but the 8 miles are too much for a glide without fuel, so the plane began its 10 minutes free fall to ground. The 300 goes down. Despite their efforts, at approximately 6:47 p.m., the plane skimmed about 100 yards along the top of the tree line before going straight, like a rocket, towards a stand of trees nearby. There is no way to slow down in that situation. The pilots see the stand of trees getting closer and closer. The left wing detaches as it hits the first tree. The airplane swivels on the right until it goes through a large tree, splitting into pieces. From the ripped fuselage, 10 people or so get hurled out. Luckily, the plane doesn't catch fire, as the fuel tanks are empty, but the impact was catastrophic. In that area, lights from a home belonging to a dairy farmer named Johnny Mote could be seen. The farmer had heard a din in the forest, a bang like if it was an earthquake, and soon after, a sight of a helicopter searchlight circling overhead his farm began to make him nervous. Mote certain was dealing with a jailbreak and fearing for escaped convicts from a nearby prison camp for trespassing, because his farm is just at the border between Mississippi and Louisiana. Mote grabbed his rifle and stood guard outside the farm. For a guy that lives like him isolated, it's better to be safe. Suddenly, shadows of 3 men moving in a strange way in the night, like staggering, were seen by him. At first sight, when they got really close, it was perceivable that they were hurt and ragged just like fugitives. So Mr. Mote points his rifle and fires a warning shot over the first guy's head. As the guys later affirmed, we all hit the dirt thinking, damn, now we're gonna get killed by a redneck farmer. So can you imagine surviving a plane crash with just a couple of broken ribs and then be killed by a rifle shot? Just ridiculous. Because the man that hears the whistle of the shots close to his ears is Artemus Pyle, the drummer of Lynyrd Skynyrd, that flew out of the plane together with sound engineer Ken Payden and roadie Mark Frank, luckily almost unharmed. And now they're searching for help.
Hey, don't shoot. My name is Thomas Pyle. I don't know who you think we are, but we're on the plane.
Maud realized at that point that they were telling the truth, as the seriousness of the situation became apparent. Maud assembled his truck, which he led across the difficult terrain to the crash site. As we said, there was no fire, which saved an untold number of lives, but also made the wreck difficult to locate in the darkness. The first to arrive on the site are two journalists of the Enterprise, along with Mississippi Medical Center and other area emergency personnel. On the site, they find themselves in front of an apocalyptic scene, with planes scattered metal pieces all over the forest, amid all the dead bodies and the wounded ones. The only thing though, nobody could imagine that they had to handle a rescue of 26 plane crash victims from a swampy patch of woods out from Gillsburg, across a creek, waiting for the ambulances. It took up to 3.5 hours to rescue all the bodies from the plane. The casualties are really bad, 6 killed and 20 injured. Pilots McCreary and Gray died instantly. Obviously they were the first one dying as soon as the plane smashed into the trees. Then guitarist Steve Gaines, his sister Casey, assistant road manager Dean Kilpatrick, and Ronnie Van Zandt also died. 3 other members of the Southern rock band were in critical condition. Alan Collins suffered 2 broken vertebrae in his neck and severe damage to his right arm, where doctors were willing to amputate. It's only thanks to his father's flair to not sign the authorization form that his arm was saved and later luckily recovered. Leon Wilkeson, the bass player, lost all his teeth. Nearly he loses an arm too. He had a fractured leg, chest injuries, and multiple abrasions. Then keys player Billy Powell almost got his nose ripped off, as he suffered severe facial lacerations and deep lacerations to his right leg. And others like Leslie Hawkins, a member of the Honkettes, broke her neck in 3 places with severe facial damage, and only with years of rehabilitation and plastic surgery she could regain her natural look. Like Gene Odom, the head security manager, that also lost the sight in one eye. Long story short, a disaster. The air disaster of that 20th October 1977 that wipes out a band, which in their genre was making history. Stories like this one are stories of destiny, divine providence, luck, or maybe just jinx if you want. In fact, this plane, the 300 Convair, the very same plane, had earlier been inspected by Aerosmith for a possible use in their 1977 American tour, pressured by Steven Tyler and Joe Perry into renting that specific plane. But when Aerosmith Chief Assistant Flight Zunk Booker inspected the plane, he said to observe pilots McCreary and Gray smoking and sharing a bottle of Jack Daniels in the cockpit. And ultimately, he backed out the rental service of the LNJ, claiming that neither the plane nor the crew were up to standards. Can you imagine how lucky they've been? Casey Gaines, instead the backup singer, part of the Honkettes, was the unlucky one. She didn't want to board on that plane. She was scared of airplanes, especially if they were small charters, such as the 300. And she was willing to travel, though squeezed, by truck with the roadies and all the music equipment, but was persuaded to reach the next concert in time and well rested. You'd remember, there were those 10,000 people waiting in Baton Rouge, so Casey boarded on that plane and died in it, in the disaster. And now listen to this anecdote about the divine providence. The other girl of the Honkettes, Jojo Billingsley, miracle, she didn't get on the plane at all. She was afraid of airplanes too, but above this, she had set out the first few tour dates to rest. And as she told to an interview, Ronnie called her the night before the concert in Greenville, saying that he wanted her to join them back in Greenville and to keep herself ready for the next gigs in Baton Rouge and Little Rock in the coming days. She said, "Well, that's music to my ears. Yes, of course." And while talking to him, she felt that strange feeling, that smell of death. I heard this word on my mind. Wait, the spirit was talking to me. So I said, "Well, I was planning to come to Little Rock anyway. Why don't I just meet you guys there?" Ronnie answered, "Good, bring all your stuff." So the divine providence shows up for her that night while sleeping, and how she admits she had the most vivid dream ever. She saw the plane smack the ground, seeing them screaming and crying, along with fire all over. As she said, "I woke up screaming, and my mom came running in going, 'Honey, what is it?' I said, 'Mama, I dreamed the plane crashed.' And she said, 'No honey, it's just a dream.' And I said, 'No mom, it's too real.' The next day, immediately she called and begged her friend Ellen Collins by telephone to not continue using that Convair. Collins said, 'Joe, what in the world is it? I've got messages all over Greenville from you.' She said, 'Ellen, it's that airplane, please don't get on the plane,' telling about her dream. He answered, 'Joe, it's funny you'd mention that because I was looking out the window yesterday and I saw fire come out of the wing,' finally promising her that it was going to be their last time to fly on that airplane and they will start flying by commercial. But the divine providence played the game on both, saving the lives of those who really believed in it. And relatively, who is the one affected by destiny? Well, when you're worried about flying on a plane that 2 days earlier had shoot out a 10-foot flame from the right engine, and your friend Early Calm tells you, "Hey, Alan, if the Lord wants you to die on this plane, when it's your time, it's your time. Let's go, man, we've got a gig to do." That means you have something to do with fate. The man that on many occasions proclaimed to his friends that he would never reach his 30th birthday, sometimes as a joke and sometimes speaking seriously, is Ronnie Van Zant. In the band circle, many believe that Ronnie had this sort of second sight, sort of a premonition of his fate. And guess what? 87 days before his 30th birthday, fate coaxed him to board on that plane. In his last minutes of life, Ronnie was warned enough about the situation. He walked towards the tail of the plane to retrieve a pillow, and as he walked forward, he crossed over Artemus, the drummer, shook his hand, they looked at each other, and he smiled. A smile aware of his destiny. So you could believe it or not, but we think that destiny is truly a part of the dark side of music, like dramatic stories as this one. Although all of the people involved acted by their free will, actually their souls and the circumstances under which they lived are all part of the universal network of fate that brought Lynyrd Skynyrd to a tragedy, yes, but also to be remembered as one of the greatest southern rock band ever.